Hi, everyone. I have the honor to host and to open up the session today, which is going to be mainly focused about HealthTech 2030, so what's going to happen in the next decade. Allow me with a brief words to introduce myself. My name is Patrick Pfeffer, and to build bridges for you guys, because my last name is a little bit hard to pronounce as a non-German speaker, Pfeffer means pepper, and thanks to my PhD thesis, you may call me the Dr. Pepper of healthcare. Other than that, you may find me on the web under the hashtag #InvestInHealth. Good. So what do I do? I'm the founder and CEO of a European healthcare crowdfunding platform called Aescuvest. And we operate that in partnership with the EIT, the so-called European Institute for Innovation and Technology, a body of the European Union that was so kind to sponsor that session here. And we operated together with their health branch called EIT Health. And our mission at Aescuvest is that we foster and fund medical breakthroughs. And our focus is we want to do things not better, but we want to focus on doing better things. That being said, enough about myself, enough about what we do. Let's focus on HealthTech 2030. And I wanted to open the session with 3 perspectives, what's going to happen in the next 10 years from now on. Perspective number 1 is rather a very short-term one, which is very likely already happening as we speak, and I call it from sick care to health care. Nowadays, healthcare should rather be called sick care because it usually takes care of people when it's too late. And the ever-emerging branch of detection and diagnosis, and this is emerging as we speak, should rather be called healthcare, right? I hope you agree. Second perspective, we should give big props and also a thank you to AI. It has been going through the media, raising anxiety and so forth, but you're talking to an optimist here. So for me personally, the glass is always half full. Saying, I certainly believe in this technology supporting mankind in boring stuff, in work and jobs mankind was not made for, in repetitive stuff and very process-oriented stuff. And probably AI allows us in the future to pursue jobs that were more appropriately made for human brains, which have some sort of connectivity to creativity. Last perspective, and then I would like to hand over to our great speakers, minds, and brains of today's session, is probably a rather provocative one. And probably you see in one or the other speeches that this is going to be taken up by the speakers. We're talking about piloting digital. When you're going to the pharmaceutical industry, to the medtech industry, let's pilot something here and there. Let's pilot a service. Let's pilot a tool. And my long-term perspective on things is, are we as mankind really piloting digital? Or is digital piloting mankind? That being said, let's open the session. Enjoy, have a great summit, and thank you for being here in this great room.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today on HealthTech 2030. My name is Catherine Longworth, and I'm a senior reporter for MedTech Insight, which is a special medical device and diagnostics publication. So I've been covering this space now for about 4 years and made many trips to Israel, so it's always good to be here and excited about the innovation that we see. And I'm from London, and the next person I'd like to welcome up to the stage is the head of the OurCrowd Medical Advisory Board, Morris Luster.
Hi, welcome to welcome to the summit. Welcome to our HealthTech breakout session. I'm pleased to announce the presentation of Professor Yaakov Nahmias. Professor Nahmias is a professor of bioengineering and serial entrepreneur. At the Nexus conference about a year ago, he presented his company Tissue Dynamics, which focuses on in vitro drug discovery platform and safety and efficacy. He was a winner of that platform that was judged by our boss, John Medved. And today he is here to present that company to us today, Professor Nahmias.
Thank you, Morris, and good morning, OurCrowd. Can you put our slides up? So our story starts several thousands of years ago, and the history that we have as human civilization is actually tied to medicine. It's not only medicine, but actually pharmaceuticals. The first pharmaceuticals discovered by the ancient Egyptians, probably by some consulting Jewish doctors, include the bark of the willow tree. The bark of the willow tree, arava, is actually very rich in ceticialic acid, aspirin. It's the same drug that my father takes every day, and actually many of us take, right? Probably we can see by a raise of hands how many people are taking aspirin here. And one of the interesting things is that if we tried to create a startup today and actually try to bring aspirin to the market, we would never be able to do that. And the reason is because aspirin, even though it's very safe in humans and we have thousands of years of experience, is actually pretty toxic to rats. You see, the story of drug discovery is a very long one today. And it's an expensive, difficult endeavor. It takes about a decade to develop a new drug and almost $2.6 billion to bring one molecule to the market. Now, it doesn't start with an incidental discovery anymore. Now we have massive libraries of molecules that we screen, and we don't find one molecule that is a pain reliever or fights against cancer. We actually find hundreds. But those molecules have to be taken for safety assessment. The process is figuring out which molecule works at the lowest concentration and is toxic at the highest. Essentially, has no toxicity in humans. But we simply don't have the tools to do that effectively. We take all those molecules and we bring them to animals, like rats and mice, maybe even dogs. And even after we invest billions of dollars in these animal studies, what happens is that we get safety assessment, we bring them to the clinic, and then we fail. And we go back, and then we fail again. And then we fail again. 95% of our molecules will fail in extremely expensive clinical studies after we do all the safety assessments and the efficacy studies. What's worse, 10% of our molecules will actually fail after receiving FDA approval and have to be withdrawn from the market. So why is this happening? It's happening because, well, animals don't really replicate the human response. We have different genetics, different metabolism, different physiology. In fact, 70% of the molecules today that are toxic to humans are not toxic to animals and vice versa. But what's worse is that we don't really learn anything from these failures. When we fail in stage 2 or stage 3 clinical studies, we just know the molecule was toxic or the molecules didn't work. We don't know how to modify the molecule to make it work. So we have to go back to our drug bank and take a different one all the way forward, and then fail, and then do it again. It's a Sisyphean process, if there ever was one. It's not only that, it's also brutally expensive. So failures like troglitazone that was developed by Pfizer cost Pfizer over $2 billion in losses. It was safe in animal studies, safe in clinical studies, but when it was brought to the market, this type 2 diabetes drug actually showed toxicity in 1 out of every 30,000 individuals, and they had to withdraw it. And it's not only troglitazone, it's also Vioxx. Vioxx, developed by Merck as a pain reliever, had cardiotoxicity. It actually, by some estimates, killed more Americans than the entire Vietnam War. and cost Merck upwards of $4 billion in losses. So what are we going to do about it? Well, tissue dynamics is actually suggesting to take human cells, make human organs, and putting them on this, a microfluidic chip. So imagine putting the best parts of you on this. We can put your cells from your heart to make a functioning heart, from your kidney, from your liver, from your brain. All of these organoids on a single chip, and we already have them working. And not only that, is that the fact that we have this human genetics, human metabolism, and human physiology enables us to be very predictive. But we went way beyond this. You see, those organs are not just sitting there. We actually integrated sensors inside them so we can measure their activity in real time. So we say that God examines kidneys and hearts. Well, so do we. And that's actually how it looks like. This is a functional beating human heart. It beats 66 beats per minute. You can actually see it beating right now on stage. And this is our liver with its integrated sensors. And we can get dynamic information that tells us that molecules like Vioxx are going to be a problem even before we go to clinical studies. Information that tells us that triglyceride is not going to be safe when you reach it to the general public. And this has been all over the news because we know exactly how to take these molecules and understand something that animal experiments simply are unable to do. So this was a major breakthrough in 2017, and we received several seals of excellence. What's more interesting is the fact that these data structures that we are generating are really unique for us. And we can take physical understanding from one organ and one drug family to another. Most recent discovery is a completely new mechanism of toxicity in the kidneys, understanding how cyclosporine causes damage. Cyclosporine is a huge market, $1.4 billion. But it's toxic, and we know it will damage patient kidneys. But slight changes that we were able to find, identify, and patent actually showed in recent retrospective clinical studies that we can completely reduce that toxicity, and all of that came from this single chip. I would just apologize for being a little bit late, but we are really providing a quantum leap in drug development, and you can imagine what it means. It means that we can reduce the cost of R&D by about 80%. That means that hundreds of companies in Israel could suddenly have the potential of not just being sold to big pharma, but actually bring their own drugs to the market, essentially level the playing field. So we are currently raising Series A, and it's been very exciting to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yaakov. Now, we're just going to hear the VC perspective from OurCrowd, and I'd like to welcome to this stage Morry Blumenfeld and Ilana Odess for a nice fireside chat. Please join me in welcoming them. I think we need some microphones, please. So welcome. Thank you so much for talking to us. Like I said, Morry and Ilana are both venture partners at OurCrowd. And I wondered if you could talk us through 3 or as many as you can think in the time we have, major trends that are going to be shaping health tech in the next 10 years. Ilana?
Thank you. A pleasure to be here today with all of you. So in 2030, I believe that the industry will move into 3 directions. One is about the aging population. Today, in China alone, though, over 350 million people over the age of 65, If you look at the United States, there are 10,000 people that enroll into Medicare. We need to take care of those chronic diseases. So that's one aspect. The second one that we also heard from Kobe is more personalized medicine and dedicated to personalized disease. And the third direction that the industry is going is automated, using a lot of the AI into this field, and obviously robotics that fits into that third category.
Yes, and I think people that were at the initial opening of the summit were totally amazed by some of the technology that's being developed, and that I'm positive is just the beginning of the totally different ways that surgery is going to be done, that people are going to get tested, and so on. So there's also all kinds of advancements in the technology as well, which will make the kinds of things that you're talking about happen.
Absolutely. And do you think, though, that sometimes we're being too over-optimistic about where we could be in 10 years' time? Is the innovation, as fantastic as we think?
I don't think so, because I don't think if you were all sitting here 3 years ago, for example, and said, we have a way to completely eliminate the cancer tumor, we would all be laughing about it. And today we saw that it happened. We were thinking that, is there ways, for example, that you're going to be able to treat Alzheimer's? Well, that's not yet real. They're working on it, and for me, I hope it happens soon, because that's another story.
Okay. And should we be excited or feeling threatened by big tech companies like Google or Amazon now entering into the healthcare space?
I think that's actually exciting. We're always used to the traditional multi-internationals, and I think we have new players, specifically when we're looking at artificial intelligence playing a role, and those Googles of the world will definitely have a lot of acquisition. So I think it adds into the pool more multi-international with different directions, more resources, and more funding.
And we saw today in the plenary session the relationship between a huge company, Pepsi-Cola, wow, and a very small company. And I think that should be sort of the modus operandi for many of these big companies.
Great. And just finally, so as investors, what catches your eye? Like, what are you looking for when you're making those, investment decisions?
I personally am looking for things that are totally new, things that are going to be innovative, that are going to change the way people are doing things. That's what and we're very happy in OurCrowd. We are getting about 5 or 6 new proposals for medical companies every week. We'll have I'd say about 400 or 500 in the year, and we will be able to choose the best of those. The best means not only the best technology, but we're also very careful about the management. As one of my old friends used to tell me, Morry, it's much better to have Class A management and Class B technology than the other way around.
Absolutely. And Ilana?
So I think, again, the technologies that address the 3 main issues that I pointed out. One example with the aging population and chronic disease, medication obviously cures but has side effects. So for instance, stimulation, which is something that's really catching on, those are areas that would interest me as an investor or calling upon investors. Less side effects, more target results. So that's one aspect out of those 3 areas. I think we ran out of time, but happy to speak to anyone during the day. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now I would like to welcome to the stage Shachar Havetz, Business Development Manager for Sompo Labs.
everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for having us, OurCrowd. It's a pleasure to be here. So I want to echo on some of the things that were already said on stage. But first, a short question, a show of hands. Does anyone know Sompo in the crowd, other than Dia? Okay, so we'll start with a very short introduction about Sompo is a multinational company, originally from Japan, a big organization with 80,000 employees, 30 billion something in revenue, operating in 30 countries. Different type of insurance products across the globe. But also related to this panel and this session, also operates a very big nursing homes operation in Japan. Over 400 facilities, 25,000 rooms that are being operated and managed by Sompo. And also, providing home services for aging population in Japan. And we'll speak a little bit about that in a while. Okay. Ooh. So Sompo is a big organization that has presence in Israel. And why is that? So as everyone knows, Israel is a startup nation. A lot of innovation is actually being formed here in Israel and can be exploited or collaborated with in Japan. I'm part of an organization that was formed 3 years ago called Digital Lab that has presence in 3 countries. First and foremost, Japan in Tokyo, Silicon Valley, and last year, Sompo opened a lab here in Tel Aviv. We have a variety of domains that we look at. The first is insurance, which is the main business for Sompo, but we're very focused also on healthcare and digital health in general in relation to aging population, but not only. And on top, just to mention, we also do provide services in Japan. We're looking for solutions in energy space and agriculture as well. We're also investing. So we already invested in 6 companies in Israel. 1 is in the digital health space. And we have collaborations that are being commercialized already in Japan. So that's a little bit about Sompo. And I want to kind of reflect on one challenge that is happening in Japan. It's happening actually all over the world, but Japan is in the forefront of that. Japan is an aging society, super aging, which means that more than 21% of the population in Japan is over 65. Just to compare, does anyone know what's the percentage of 65 years old or more in Israel? About 8, yeah. So the numbers are between 8 and 10% in Israel. The number in Japan is closer to 30. And with population of 128 million people in Japan, do the simple math, about 40 million people are over the age of 65. And this presents a lot of challenges in many aspects, socially, economically, health-related services that should be provided to this population is a growing concern. And one of the ways to deal with that is to be more effective, to have a personal way of taking care of this population, devising new ways to engage and new ways to identify who is the actual person who is needed in a service right now. And a few examples of solutions that some of them are related to Israeli companies, but the general concept is to have a way to address specific needs of specific people. This can be done with specialized medication that rely on DNA, human DNA, for example, to have a better fit of the actual drug to the specific person. Specifically in aging, or the ability to provide care to aging population is through introducing new digital ways to monitor through IoT devices and others to enable people to age at home. If you think of providing services to 40 million people, you need to do it in an efficient way. You need to be able to understand the specific needs of every person to have an effective mechanism that treats those patients. So those are just one spotlight on a specific area that we're looking at in terms of the challenges in Japan. And I want to conclude with a statement that says that all men and women are created equal, but in order to be effective and provide an effective and efficient care, we need to treat them differently. Wish everyone a very fruitful and interesting day today, and have fun.
Thank you so much. And next to the stage, I would like to welcome Ronen Eavri, the co-founder and CEO of Barcode Diagnostics.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'll get right to the point. So at Barcode Diagnostics, we are developing a safe and fast precision medicine treatment decision tool to guide physicians in selecting the optimal treatment for each individual cancer patient. In some cases, in breast cancer, for instance, triple-negative breast cancer, the doctor has up to 10 different drugs to choose one optimal treatment from, but no way to tell which one is the most effective treatment. And the way Barcode Diagnostics addresses this is by actually selecting different medications, encapsulating them in very, very small quantities in nanoparticles, and together with the drug in each nanoparticle, we encapsulate a molecular barcode to tell us exactly which drug is in that nanoparticle. And in this way, we can generate a mixture of different nanoparticles with very, very small quantities of drugs that will be delivered into the bloodstream of the patient. These nanoparticles are known nanoparticles. They have been used in treatment of cancer, and they reach the tumor, they go into the cells of the tumor. If a drug is potent, it will kill the cell that it went into, and if it's not effective, the cell will stay alive. A biopsy that is taken from the tumor 48 hours after the injection of the nanoparticle mixture is then sent out to our analysis lab. In that lab, we actually differentiate between the dead and live cells. So dead cells go into one vial and live cells go into another vial. And what we do now, and this is a magic trick, as I told you before, the most potent drugs will kill the most amount of cells in the tumor. And when we differentiate the dead and live cells, we actually can quantify how many barcodes are in the dead cell population for each of the different drugs. So this way we can provide an answer to the physician within 72 hours, 48 from the injection, another 24 hours for our analysis. We can tell the physician how well each of the different drugs that were injected simultaneously did, and from there the physician can decide on the best treatment. So the question in this session is, where do we see the future of, in my case, the diagnostic technologies? And I must tell you, we first made this slide as a competitive landscape, but in the last year, I've been talking more and more about the opportunity in the field. And I think what's important here is taking, Barcode Diagnostic will provide one aspect of a diagnostic solution or a treatment decision for the physician and for the patient. And this is by actually testing the responsiveness of the different cells in the tumor in the tissue. But actually, we can collect so much information from a patient. So the companies here in the space on the lower left-hand side are companies which are collecting genomic analysis. Each of these companies tries to use this data to make the smartest decision about a treatment option for a patient. Companies on the on the upper left-hand side are companies which actually take the biopsies from the patient, try to grow them in dishes, and then try to figure out which of the different drugs acts in a cell dish, and then predict the outcome in a patient. And companies on the lower right-hand side are companies which take these blood biopsies and try to find out, based on different markers, how well each of the drugs that are given to a patient are responsive, or how responsive the patient is to a drug. And I think the question is how in the future, in the next few years, all of these companies can integrate the data together to have one comprehensive data set that will help each individual patient to a better outcome in cancer. And this is the way I see the future of the diagnostic field by 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we'll just have a little chat about personalized medicine, if you want to join me on the floor. Yeah, thank you for your presentations. So this is exciting technologies we've got. We've had a lot. And from both your perspectives, when it comes to this type of innovation, the big question always is, who's going to pay for it? And maybe we can talk a bit about the reimbursement landscape, or is this a priority as well in sort of the provision of healthcare, and where are we going to be in 10 years in terms of who's going to be paying for this technology?
So reimbursement is a big question for us as a startup. And I think strategically we're building the company so that these patients can get, of course, reimbursed, because otherwise you can't really exist. I think it's also important first to show you want to get reimbursement because you're saving money for a company, and if a patient gets better based on a diagnostic technology, then I think there is a large incentive, and I think it's on us to prove that it works. So if this kind of treatment works, and I think it's true for every kind of treatment, the major outcome is lowering the cost of patient care, and I think we're trying to do that on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, and I think it's also important to, as a CEO of a company, to look forward and to see the evolvement of reimbursement strategy, and I think it also will change as we move further.
Okay, so I think understanding who is the payer is a very key question, and it relates to actually the health system that is present in each of the countries or geographies. Specifically in Japan, the government has now a very big issue because originally or historically, health insurance is being provided by the government, which means that now that the cost or the needs of the population go up, it means that the economics are growing as well. And there is a big burden on the government to find effective and efficient solutions in order to reduce those costs. So I assume some of the ramifications of that would be that new models of healthcare systems would be introduced. And we see big organizations like Amazon and Google and Apple entering this domain, which those guys haven't been there historically, which means that we will probably see new ways to first generate data, but also find new ways to fund the actual services that are being provided to the population.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Right, thank you so much. Next to the stage, we have Dr. Inken Braunschmidt, who is the Chief Innovation and Digital Officer at Halma.
Hello, I'm Inken Braunschmidt and my company is Halma. Halma is a FTSE 100 UK-based company, and we are owning 50 companies all over the world. And all these 50 companies share one purpose. And this purpose is growing a safer, cleaner, healthier future for everyone, every day. And you might recognize from this purpose, healthier gives you a hint that 1/3 of our companies are in the medical area, mainly, specifically in vital signs, in diagnostics, in real-time location in hospitals, and last but not least in ophthalmology, both diagnosis and surgery. So I was asked to talk about why medical safety is an important trend and why it is shaping 2030, and not just how do we get there and where we are. So medical safety is a quite wide technical term. I usually try to divide it in just 5 areas. I know usually you just remember 3, but it's 5. So you could have hospital clinical safety. Then, of course, you have patient, people safety. You have medical device safety. You have drug safety. And last but not least, and that, of course, was rather added recently and is getting more important, is data. Personal data safety. What I would like to share shortly with you is how we at Halma, with our companies, are tackling this trend going forward to 2030, and mainly in the area of clinical hospital safety and personal patient and data safety. So one of our companies is Centrec, and Centrec has real-time location for clinics, for hospitals, keeping people, doctors, but also assets safe, and to be able to monitor what happens. So you could see where people are, if they're wandering around, if they get lost, if they go out of the hospital, what they shouldn't do. And it's also taking care of regulation, which means, for example, if a patient calls a nurse coming to the room, that due to regulation, she first has to wash her hands at the sink before she approaches the patient. So again, we speak here about keeping patients and people safe in a hospital area. A second area is we have quite some companies in vital signs, and one of our companies, Suntech, just recently partnered with a US startup called Walensel, and we invested in them because what they are able to do is 24 hours continuous blood pressure measurement, because their technology and sensors goes, for example, in these ear devices where you hear music or whatever you do with them. So it is all about gathering this data and then being able, based on the data you have, to predict and prevent if an event, heart attack, or any anomaly with your heart is happening. So we want to know this before it happens to keep the person or the patient safe. And last but not least, and this is again going also into the data area, we just invested in a startup here in Israel, which is called Aulytics. Aulytics is a data AI company, but their use case is all about keeping elderly safe. And we heard already in one of the talks earlier, this specifically is about fall prevention, or to know if a person, an elderly person, has fallen, that there is help and help coming. So, as you might see, especially the last 2 examples, the topic of data is getting more and more into what we do in health and in medical. So the topic of keeping the data and the patient's data safe is getting a more and more important topic. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to stay with me, and then we'll have some questions in a bit. Great. And next, we have from Medisafe, Omri Shor, founder and CEO.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I don't have slides. That's not our slides. Although I can introduce Scopio, maybe. So, but I'll just tell you more about our story at Medisafe. So our story begins back in 2012. My father is diabetic, and he came to me and he asked me a quick question, which was, have you seen me inject my insulin today? And I gave him an Israeli-type answer. If you have ever worked with Israelis, you will know. My answer was no. I meant by that, no, I haven't seen you, but unfortunately, he heard it as, no, you haven't injected your medications. So as a result of that, he injected the dose of insulin. That was the second one in a row that day. And got almost into a diabetic shock. So that was back in 2012. We started thinking about medication management and to quantify the problem. And let me share some numbers with you guys. 700,000 people a year suffer an emergency due to medication mismanagement. Just to quantify the problem, I'm sure that most of you have not heard about that problem, but just to compare to something that you probably heard about quite a lot over the last few days, coronavirus. So that's 12x of the people that were infected so far with coronavirus. It's a huge problem in the US, and 125,000 people a year die because of that. So we've decided to solve that and founded Medisafe to solve the problems of medication management and adherence. And we're very fortunate from this one father. Today, we have 6 million registered users that have signed up on Medisafe, and we're considered the leading medication management platform in the world. So the first side of our vision is to empower people to improve their health using technology. The second one is so we can create outcomes for the healthcare industry. And Medisafe partners across the entire health spectrum, specifically with pharma companies as well as payers, and we work to empower their patients. So by partnering with them, essentially we help them manage the patient journey. From the moment that the patient gets prescribed with the drug, we help to manage this process. We're improving a process that today is happening by nurses without any visibility to the data, and we empower both the patients with the right data, the right information at the right time, as well as the nurses. We become a bridge for those patients into the healthcare system. So we've partnered across the healthcare ecosystem with some of the bigger names that you might know, Pfizer, Boehringer Ingelheim, Novartis, Merck, throughout the years. And we're able to create a very meaningful business both for us and for them, and we're in the process of scaling this up. When you think about the patient journey from the moment that the patient is prescribed and you understand the complexities where each and every patient is different, our use of technology, machine learning, and AI to improve healthcare and to improve the engagement of that patient is really what's driving much better outcomes for our partners and clients across the healthcare ecosystem. We have just this week been announced that we're joining the OurCrowd portfolio, and we're welcoming you to take a look at the opportunity to join us at Medisafe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, if you want to take a seat. So I'd be interested to both hear your thoughts about, when we're on the topic of data, patient journey, and obviously for physicians. Are we getting to a stage that it's fantastic where we're digitizing and we have all these tools at our disposal, but is there a fear that we'll be overwhelmed with data and that it could become too cumbersome?
Maybe to start, I don't think so, because we will adopt, as we always did, to this amount of data and what's available and so on and so forth. I think there's two aspects which are important, what is happening at the moment. One, of course, is that more data is available, but it is available because more and more people and persons also measuring themselves with all the little devices we have. So they want to know about their personal data, health data. They're measuring themselves, and there's lots of offerings out there. So it's not that people are forced to do so. It's a huge trend. People do that to themselves. I think that's one important point why we might get used to it. The second thing then, of course, is if you want to leverage this data and based on the insights do important things with it, then you have just to make sure to keep people's data safe, because there's a difference. I decide I measure, or if you decide you want to do something with my data. And I think these are the main two things to look at. So there's something good, but something to take care of.
I think that, so at Medisafe, since we have 6 million registered users, we have about 15 billion data points around how people take their medications. And I think that not only with us, but the entire industry is shifting from days where it was all about the data to days that it's all about the insights. And what type of insights can you extract from that data and empower both your patients with those insights as well as the healthcare ecosystem. If you'll be able to do that, you're actually relieving the stress and the overwhelming of the healthcare industry and empower them. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for our final two sessions, I'd like to welcome Alan Kamer to the stage. He's the managing partner at OurCrowd Qure Ventures.
Yeah, Doron, why don't you join me up here as well? I'm inviting Dr. Doron Behar. Doron is an MD, PhD from the Technion here. He's one of the world's renowned genomic experts with over 100 publications. And Doron is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Identify, which Qure has invested in. And there's no one better to talk about the growth in the genomics market. I'm going to start by giving a brief history. So it was at the beginning of the 1900s, the 20th century, where the term gene, genotype, and phenotype were first used by Danish professor Wilhelm Johansen in an article about hereditary. It took nearly 50 years until the DNA was discovered by Watson and Crick in their esteemed lab of researchers. Within the next decade, we saw breakthrough discoveries. What was the cause of Down syndrome with trisomy 21, and the creation of a metabolic disorder test, PKU, for newborn infants. It took about another 45, 50 years for the whole genome to be mapped at the beginning of this century. And since then, the growth and change has been staggering. An average-sized, large-ish lab will do over 10,000 individual types of tests. And the field has become as diverse as oncogenetics and direct-to-consumer genetic testing. And alongside that, we've seen the market roughly triple in the last decade to nearly $19 billion in revenue, all while the cost of genetic tests have fallen faster than Moore's Law. In the coming decade, we expect that by 2025, the space to be generating revenue north of $25 billion, and by the end of the decade, greater than $40 billion, all while prices continue to decline. And with that, I turn it to Doron and ask, what's driving this growth, and how is the field expanding so rapidly and continuing to grow so dramatically?
Hi, so good morning, everybody. The topic is, what are we going to expect from the genomic revolution in 2030? So the genomic field is currently exploding, and in its most basic form, it means that we do anticipate that each individual sitting in this room and everybody that you saw today will have his genome as part of his medical records or as part of his records per se. The reason is very, very simple. The price of the genome dropped to below $1,000, and we are expecting to see genomes for $100, which means that this is becoming maybe the most value for money medical expense that anyone can take throughout his lifetime, because your genome is not going to expand. And once you have read it once or write it once, then you can repeatedly look at it and read again and again. So we are expecting massive incorporation of data into our medical records. And then we also do expect it to be related to particular fields and be a pillar for what we call now precision medicine, which is about prevention and is part of health policies that we anticipate that many, many MOHs around the globe will adopt. We are seeing major penetrance into reproductive health, oncogenetics, both the inherited mutations, the germline mutation, and the soma mutations, which are the mutations that our genome is, our cancer might be showing. And then pharmacogenomics is a major field. And then we see now more and more application in what we call adult genomics, which might be, for example, early onset neurological disorders, or the proof that some cardiac arrhythmias might be a result of a gene that has this or that mutation. We are also going to see in the coming decade massive discussions about how do we use genomic data, privacy issue. Who owns the data? Is it the individual, his healthcare provider, the state, and so on? So I do anticipate, to make it very sure, that people in 10 years are going to speak genomics. Vocabulary is going to be very, very familiar with everybody, and we are going to be using our genome on major medical decisions that we are going to take throughout lifetime, and that is really going to be a pillar, as I said, of precision medicine.
So one final question for you, Doron. Talk to us a little bit about what Identify does and tell us how the consumer gets involved in your solutions.
Absolutely. So just to give you some figures, I was lucky to be one of the individuals that founded the first direct-to-consumer company. And the company is seeing now roughly 3,000 to 10,000 new DNA samples coming in the lab every day. So certainly the consumers are very well responding to this. There's been some publication recently showing that there is a decrease. This is another thing that we can discuss maybe outside. But what that we do see, and this is the purpose of Identify, while we are speaking about application that each individual will have to use a few times throughout his lifetime, there are only 7,000 genetic counselors worldwide. We are speaking ridiculous numbers in Asia, 4.4 billion individuals with 350 genetic counselors to support them. We are speaking about India, 1/6 of the live births is happening in India. We speak about 8 genetic counselors, and so on. So Identify was established to allow medical geneticists and genetic counselors to scale up and outreach and deliver the message of genomics to everybody. By combining, we are living through many revolutions in these times. One of them is the genomic. The second, of course, is the digital revolution. We are here to synergize the digital and the genomic revolution and create the first digital genetic counselor that will help medical teams to upscale and allow the promise of genomics to reach everybody worldwide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, I would like to welcome up Itai Hahut, who is the co-founder of Scopio Labs. And don't forget that after this, we will have some time for some networking. So if there's any final questions, please save them for them. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So thanks for having me here. I'm now the last speaker, so I'll try to keep it short and focused. So at Scopio Labs, what we have done, we've developed a technology that enables to scan microscopy slides at higher resolution than any existing solution and using dramatically lower hardware costs. And when we're talking about healthcare 2030, I think not many people know that almost all microscopy diagnostics in the world is currently done using manual microscopes. And by 2030, I believe that we'll be able to completely revolutionize this field with digital solutions. So we develop both hardware and software, right? It's the imaging and the analysis. Imaging, like I said, the highest resolution scanning of microscopy slides in the world, low hardware cost, but the analysis, we provide 2 types of solutions to our customers across all verticals. One type of solution is remote consultation, because now finally the expert doesn't have to physically be where the slide is, and the other one is AI tools that we develop. It's the first solution that is agnostic to all microscopy samples that can be done with light microscopy. So it's in healthcare and also non-healthcare. We have a very active veterinary business and research labs and so on, but also in healthcare, microscopy being used for histopathology, fine aspirates, cervical cancer screening, male fertility, and many, many other fields. How we do it? So how can we create the highest resolution solution with using low hardware cost. And the trick is we use computational photography. So we're not using accurate mechanics like a limited and expensive device by other manufacturers that physically scan the slide with very high accuracy. Because, you know, in microscopy, we have a trade-off between field of view and resolution. And they want high resolution, so the small field of view kind of dictates the need to have this very accurate mechanics. We take a completely different approach. So we use low resolution lenses, very large field of view, and we use multiple images under different illumination conditions of the same area, and the computer knows how to reconstruct the high-resolution image. So basically, we took all the heavy lifting from the accurate mechanics and high-grade optics and pushed it into computational photography. So the first application that we have deployed this in is veterinary care. We have a few dozens of veterinary hospitals in the East Coast in the US as paying customers. They used to send biopsies, usually FNAs, to pathologists with a courier, wait about 48 hours to get the answer. And with our technology, they can just scan the slide. They pay the same thing that they would pay with the courier. And the pathologist will look online, will do the case, and provide them an answer within 1 hour, right? So they used to wait for 48 hours. Now they get the answer within 1 hour, which means that they can get the answer when the pet owner is still in the clinic, right? Now we're deploying also some AI tools to veterinary care as well, but you can imagine the opportunities that also here in improving both, you know, care and economics. On the same hardware platform, we're also building a solution that's now undergoing FDA approval. Clinical trial in a multi-center clinical trial, both in US and in Israel. So in hematology lab, there is a very tedious task of observing, using a microscope, blood smears and counting the cells, right? It's not blood count, it's the hematopathology, it's the more advanced kind of test they do. It's very tedious and inaccurate, and what our device is doing, again using the same hardware, is scanning the slide. We use AI to detect and pre-classify the white blood cells and also platelets and other cells. And the user can look at what the AI has done. So this is a decision support system. We pre-classify these cells to 17 classes. And you know, you can approve this, you can correct this if needed, but we managed to save 90% of the work and make it much more accurate. So like I said, this is undergoing clinical validation. And the last tool, and I think maybe something that we're very proud and very excited about as well, is a solution for research labs and also for pathology. So one of the challenges in research labs is that there's a lot of applications. One researcher is counting yeast cells, the other one is dissecting genetically modified mice, and we wanted to provide AI tools that, you know, will be scalable to all of them. So we've come up with something we call the Foundry. It's the first it's the first software platform that enables the end user to train his or her own AI models without coding. So the expert's actually marking the cells that he or she wants to quantify. And what you're going to see now is real time, so they press go, and the system will look at it, will learn, and will apply it to the other parts of the slides, and not only one slide, but you can do it for 100 slides. So this was real time, and the system has identified whatever it was trained to do on the spot. You can apply this on multiple slides, you can quantify things, and it's really a scalable solution to all microscopy applications. One of the head of departments in pathology told us, oh, it's amazing, you have built an intern for me, right? Because now I can teach you to do things, right? And you know, using this scalable imaging system and scalable AI tools, we think we can really drive this digital transformation. So thank you very much.